Shadows of fallen Olympus. A cold, biting wind swept through the ruins of what was once a great city. Now only shards of marble and broken columns remained as reminders of its former glory. Here, among the shadows and ashes, only echoes of the past dwelled, along with those who had nowhere else to go. Cheyenne sat by a weak fire kindled in the skull of some long-forgotten monster. The flames licked at his rusty armor but offered no warmth. He felt no cold, only a constant aching emptiness. His kingdom was here, among the dead stones and wandering souls. He heard their whispers, thousands of lost voices merging into a single, continuous howl of despair. He clenched his fists, and the shadows around him tightened, briefly muffling the voices. This was his curse, to feel every suffering soul and be powerless to help them. Suddenly, the whispers of the souls changed. Amid their chaos, a new motif emerged. Not fear, not pain, but order. A clear, measured rhythm, like a march. And a smell, coppery, pungent, familiar to the point of nausea. A figure emerged from the fog. Kern. His massive two-handed axe was notched and stained with dark spots. He breathed heavily, steam billowing from beneath his helmet. He stopped on the other side of the fire, his eyes burning with red flame, fixed on Cheyenne. The shadows whisper that you seek death. Cheyenne's voice was like the grinding of stone against stone. Kern laughed hoarsely. They lie. I seek battle. And death? Death has long forgotten my path. He threw a blood-stained medallion bearing the symbol of a shining sun at Cheyenne's feet. They are coming. They say they bring light. They bring order. Their ranks are strong. Their battle formation is nearly flawless. His voice carried an almost wistful tone. Before Cheyenne could respond, a calm, calculating voice rang out from a high arch above them. Their formation has a weakness. The left flank. That's where the recruits are. They will break first. Tekka dropped down without a sound. Her gaze darted from Kern to Cheyenne, then to the surrounding ruins, assessing threats, exits, points of attack. Her fingers nervously traced the hilt of her short dagger. They pray to Zeus, and the name sounded like a curse. They say he will awaken and fix everything, restore order. Cheyenne slowly rose. The shadows around him thickened. What awakens will not be Zeus. We made him what he is, with our fears, our greed, our betrayal. It will be a Moloch, and it will require not prayer, it will require fuel, millions of souls. Gurn grinned darkly. Then there will be a battle. A battle? Tekka sneered. It will be a slaughter. On their side. If done correctly. Her eyes ignited with a cold fire, and she began drawing lines and arrows in the sand. They are coming through the Whale of Lamentation. We will give them hell. Cheyenne looked at them, the war-obsessed berserker and the paranoid strategist. They were fragments, shards of what once was, just like him. And that was enough. Very well, he said. And the shadows obeyed him, crawling toward him, forming a semblance of armor around him. The three fallen gods moved into the fog, leaving the dying fire behind. A new day was beginning in a world without a sun.
Fog in the Vale of Lamentation was not just fog. It was thick, like a broth of nightmares, and within it swam flashes of distorted memories, shards of long-fallen warriors' screams, whispers of curses, and the metallic taste of fear. Cheyenne walked ahead, and the fog parted before him, not out of respect, but out of rejection. His nature was different, more ancient and darker than this corrupted magic. Tekka followed, her gaze continuously scanning the cliffs, searching for anomalies, traps, signs of presence. Her fingers never stopped moving. She was counting probabilities on a string of dried bone phalanges. "They're already here," her voice cut sharply through the oppressive silence. "No more than 500 paces away, a column. Vanguard, 3 squads, heavy infantry. Behind them, priests, and something large. Their aura distorts space, unclear what." Kern only laughed hoarsely and gripped the handle of his axe so tightly that the steel creaked. "Large. Excellent. Let there be something to warm up on." "Quiet," Tekka snapped. "Your rage will get us killed prematurely. Shion, can your shadows rise from the earth?" The god of the dead nodded without turning. "The earth here is saturated with death. They crave to manifest." "Good." Tekka pointed to a narrow path above the gorge. "Kern, you'll be there. Don't move until I give the signal. Your task is to create noise, panic, break their formation when they attack." "Noise," Kern snorted. "I can do more." "You will do as you're told," Tekka's voice rang like sharpened steel. Something wild and paranoid flashed in your eyes. "Or they will surround us and we will die, all of us. Do you want to die by the speed of some fanatic, or do you want to win?" Kern muttered something, but obediently crawled up the cliff, dissolving into the fog. Tekka turned to Zion. "When the formation breaks, your shadows attack from the flanks. The target is the priests. They are the source of their strength, their order. Without them, they are just a crowd." "What about that large thing?" Chaim asked, his voice indifferently, but the shadows around him stirred more anxiously. "That is not your concern," Tekka replied, and for the first time uncertainty crept into her voice. She turned away. "That is my prey." Below, in the gorge, a steady iron hum began. At first, it was the sound of hundreds of spears striking shields, merging into a threatening rhythm. Then figures began to emerge from the fog. Warriors at the clut. Their armor shone with an unnatural, blinding light that hurt the eyes. Their faces were hidden by helmets adorned with a stylized sun. They marched in perfect formation, without a single misstep. And behind them, surrounded by priests in white robes, floated a huge figure shrouded in cloth. Something emitting waves of almost physical pressure that made the heart clench. Tekka gripped her dagger until her knuckles turned white. "Get ready," she whispered. At that moment, a roar echoed from the top of the cliff. Not a human roar, but a sound like the fury of an entire army of demons. It was Kern. The giant figure crashed into the thick of the formation, and his axe carved a bloody arc. Shield saturated with a crunch, armor tore like paper. The perfect formation wavered, plunging into chaos for a moment. "Now!" Tekka shouted. Shion raised his hands, and the earth around the cut wires came alive. From under the stones, from the very shadows rose semi-transparent, eye-gaudy twisted figures, spirits of the fallen. They could not kill, but they passed through armored, instilling a chilling, paralyzing terror into the soldiers' hearts. Their perfect formation completely fell apart. The priests fussed, raising amulets. Their voices merged into a hymn, and the glow around them intensified, pushing back the shadows. And then Tekka moved. She did not run. She vanished into the shadow of a cliff and reappeared behind the priests, her dagger slit in 2 throats in a flash. Chaos reached its peak. But then the large thing stirred. The cloth fell away, revealing a creature of flesh and metal, something between a man and the statue of Zeus. Its eyes blazed with lightning. It turned to Tekka and let out a deafening roar, raising its fist to crush her. Kern, engrossed in the slaughter, Stadius, and his orange found a new focus. "Mine!" he roared as he fought through the crowd towards the giant. Tekka rolled away, her face contorted not with fear, but with cold fury. "No, he is mine! I calculated his weak points!" But care no longer hurt her. The god of war clashed with the artificial titan, and the impact of their meeting forces reverberated throughout the gorge, knocking warriors off their feet. Shion watched this, standing motionless like death itself. His shadows continued their work. He saw how his 2 allies were ruining the perfect plan because of their obsessions. "Fools," he whispered soundlessly. "We have all been in hell for a long time, and you are only digging it deeper." The battle had only just begun.
The collision between Kern and the Titan was like 2 mountains crashing together. The clang of metal, the crack of bone, and the roar of fury merged into a deafening symphony of destruction. Kern wasn't fighting, he was raging. His axe left deep gashes in the magically reinforced flesh of the colossus, but it seemed to feel almost no pain. Tekka darted on the periphery of the battle like an enraged wasp. Her daggers were fast and precise. She found microscopic joints in the cult soldier's armor, severing tendons and arteries. But her gaze constantly returned to Kern. Her plan was crumbling before her eyes, and that infuriated her more than the threat itself. "Idiot! A mindless, spineless butcher," she hissed, dodging a spear thrust. "I calculated everything, every move, and he's ruining it all." Her paranoia whispered to her that Kern was doing this on purpose, that he wanted to claim her glory, her prize, and then maybe even turn his weapon on her. Her fingers clenched the hilts of her daggers so tightly they were on the verge of cracking. Chaos observed. His shadows were choking the last resisting soldiers, imposing a silent, chilling terror upon them. He saw Kern's rage. He saw Tekka's cold, calculated fury, and he saw their common weakness. They were slaves to their curses of war and paranoia. The Titan struck Kern with a powerful blow, hurling him into a cliff. He landed with a rough gasp, the granite cracking beneath him. The giant turned, its lightning eyes finding a new target, Tekka, who had just finished off the last priest. "Threat system detected. Liquidation." Tekka froze for a moment, her intellect feverishly sifting through options. Dodge, counterattack, flee. The calculation showed an alarmingly low chance of success. At that moment, a wall of darkness erupted from the ground before her, dense, impenetrable, light-absorbing. The Titan's fist slammed into it and stopped. The shadow didn't deflect the blow, it absorbed it like a swamp. It was chaos. He stood motionless, one hand outstretched. His cloak billowed in a non-existent wind. "Enough," he said. And his voice was quieter than before, but it held steel. "This creature belongs neither to you nor to him. It belongs to no one. It is a mistake, and mistakes must be corrected." Kern, getting to his feet, roared something incoherent, full of rage and resentment. Tekka wanted to object, to argue, but she saw the look in Chaos's eyes. A look not of a god, not of a king, but of a being who had seen too many deaths to tolerate another foolish one. The Titan struck the wall again, but the shadows only tightened, growing denser. Kern, he did not turn his head. Its back, at the base of the neck, the power source. Your axe can destroy it. "I knew that," Tekka shouted. "I calculated it first. The left shoulder has a 3% weaker—" "Shut up!" They barked in unison. Kern snorted, spat blood, and charged back into the fray. But this time his rage was not blind, it was focused, like an arrow. While Chaos's shadows held the Titan, Kern climbed onto its back, ignoring the lightning arcing from the golem's body. His axe swung up, and with a deafening roar, plunged precisely into the indicated spot. A sound like the crack of 1,000 lightnings at once echoed through the gorge. The giant froze, its eyes extinguished. Then it crashed to the ground like a mountain, shattering into pieces of magic and metal. Silence fell, only broken by Kern's heavy breathing and the whisper of the finally dissipating shadows. Tekka slowly approached the wreckage, her face pale. Efficiency was 7% below optimal due to lack of coordination. She muttered, but there was no triumph in her voice, only weariness. Kern sat on a rock, wiping blood from his face. He looked at no one. Chaos walked to the center of the former formation. He bent down and picked up an amulet from one of the priests, a shining sun. He clenched it in his palm, and the shadow absorbed the light, leaving only a dull piece of metal.
They did not bring order. They brought another form of chaos, dressed in gold and false promises. He threw the amulet to the ground. We stopped them today, but there will be more of them, and they will be stronger. Because the world is not afraid of chaos. The world is afraid of emptiness, and we are walking emptiness. He looked at his allies. If we fight each other, we will become just another part of their fuel, just another mistake for someone else to come and correct. Kern gloomily raised his head. Tekka fell silent, something resembling understanding flashing in her eyes. An unpleasant, bitter understanding. They were not a team. They were not a family. They were three catastrophes who had accidentally collided at the edge of the world, and that was the only thing they had. "Where to next?" Kern asked, hoarsely, breaking the tension once more. Chaos pointed deeper into the gorge, where the fog was even thicker. "Forward. As long as we are moving, we are at least not rotting on the spot."
The gorge of lament was behind them, but its echo pursued them. It rang in Tekka's ears with an obsessive, unbearable hum. Every scrape of a stone underfoot, every rustle of Haon's cloak, she perceived as a threat. Her fingers never stopped moving, as if sorting through invisible threads of possibilities. "They knew we were coming," she suddenly exhaled, breaking the oppressive silence. Their formation, it was perfect for defending against an ambush in that exact spot, as if someone warned them. Haon finished for her. His voice was flat, devoid of surprise. Cairn merely snorted hoarsely, dragging his axe over the stones. "Means there'll be another fight, and thank God." "No, not and thank God," Tekka hissed back at him, a note of panic in her voice. Her eyes darted wildly around. "It means they have a source of information, someone who knows our weaknesses. My schematics, your rage, his—" She shot a glance at Haon and fell silent. "My solitude," Haon said quietly. He wasn't looking at them. He was staring into the depths of the fog, as if he could see something the others could not. "Someone who knows we are divided, that we easily become enemies to each other." Tekka froze. Her paranoia, usually uncontrollable, had suddenly found a specific target. It was almost a relief. "Who?" she asked, and her voice became sharp, professional. "Who among the remaining ones could have done it? Aphrodite? Her charms were always a game of shadows. Hebe? Her naivety could have become a weapon in someone else's hands." Haon slowly shook his head. "Not them. Their motives are too simple. This is something else. Someone's presence feels different, ancient, predatory." Suddenly Cairn stopped. He raised his head, listening to the silence, broken only by their breathing and the eternal whisper of the wind. "Quiet," he growled. "Do you hear that?" Tekka tensed, her hand reaching for a dagger. "What? I don't hear any." And then they heard it. At first it was a barely perceptible whisper, like the rustling of dry leaves. Then it grew louder, taking form. It was a voice. Gentle, melodious, full of ancient sorrow and inexpressible wisdom. "They walk the path of discord, children of the shattered sky. They carry their own ruin within them." It didn't come from a single source. It hung in the very fog, enveloping them from all sides. Tekka squeezed her eyes shut, trying to locate the source, to filter out the noise. Holographic projection? Psi attack? Mass hypnosis? Probability? I can't calculate it. Her voice rose to a falsetto. Cairn spun around, his rage bubbling within him, finding no outlet. "Where are you? Show yourself and fight, creature!" Only Haon stood motionless. He closed his eyes, listening not to the words, but to their essence. One seeks a peace he cannot be given. Another seeks a battle that will never satisfy. The third seeks a control that always slips away. This is not an attack, Heian said suddenly, opening his eyes. His gaze was empty and bottomless. It's an invitation. The whisper fell silent, as if it had never been. The fog ahead parted, revealing a narrow path leading to a small grotto. Leaning against the rock at its entrance stood a figure in long, tattered robes. In its hands it held a staff entwined with withered vines. Heian took a step forward. The shadows at his feet stirred more anxiously. "We are listening," he said with a voice that held neither fear nor interest. "Speak. Our patience is thinner than you think." The figure raised its head. From under the hood, a face looked out at them, neither old nor young, with eyes the color of olive wood in which a bottomless, weary sadness swirled. "I am not your enemy, shards of what was." Her voice was that very whisper from the fog, but now it sounded clear. "I am merely a gardener, in a garden long overgrown with weeds. You have trampled my flower beds and killed my reapers." She nodded towards the gorge of lament. Teka exhaled sharply. "You led that cult?" "Led? No. I sowed. Sowed order, idyll, peace, what this wounded world so desperately wants. They simply weeded a little too zealously." Cairn growled and his fingers tightened around the haft of his axe again. "So it was you who sent that iron thing at us?" "I sent it to protect what I had nurtured, from the likes of you, wild beasts who bring only chaos." For the first time there was steel in her voice. Heian raised a hand, stopping Cairn, who was ready to charge into battle. "Who are you?" he asked simply. The woman straightened to her full height. "I was once called Themis, goddess of justice, order, and law." She looked down at her tattered robes with bitter irony. "Look what we have all become. You into monsters, and I into a stubborn old woman, trying to sweep up the shards of a broken world with my staff." Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Themis, the one whose laws they had all, one way or another, once broken. She was the one who knew their weaknesses. She was the one who could have predicted their every move. She was the architect of their recent nightmare. The silence that followed her words was thicker than the fog and heavier than the stone arches of the grotto. Cairn was the first to break it. His raspy laugh sounded like iron scraping against stone. "Themis," he spat on the ground. "The very one who was always grumbling about justice and law? So is your law now sending iron freaks to slaughter us?" Themis did not flinch. Her weary face looked at him with the same unchanging calm. "My law is order, what you stole from the world with your fall. I am trying to return it, by any means necessary, yes, even if it requires drastic weeding." Her gaze slid over Teka, who felt a chill run down her spine. Themis saw her calculated plans, her paranoia, and deemed it a weed to be plucked. Teka spoke, and her voice trembled with suppressed rage and fear. Her intellect, her primary weapon, had been completely read by the enemy. This was worse than any physical blow. "Your calculations are incorrect," she blurted out. "Your weeding will lead to systemic collapse. You are destroying diversity, and it is diversity that ensures the system's resilience.
Your order is a fragile monoculture that will crumble at the first push. Better a fragile order than eternal chaos. Passion rang in Themis's voice for the first time, dry and merciless, like the law itself. Haion had been silent all this time. He looked at Themis but did not see her. He saw thousands, millions of souls whose lives would become mere cogs in her machine, ordered, predictable, and dead inside. "You judge us," he said quietly. His voice cut through the argument like a blade. Themis turned her gaze, full of mute sorrow, toward him. "By the right of one who is trying to correct a mistake. Yes, I fell, but I did not resign myself. I do not wander the ruins mourning my fate. I act. My judgment may be imperfect, but it is the only judgment left in this world." "This is not judgment," Haion objected. A spark of something ancient and terrible flashed in his empty eyes. "This is dictatorship. You are not dispensing justice. You are imposing your fear. Fear of chaos, fear of freedom, fear of life itself." He took a step forward. The shadows at his feet swirled and crept along the ground toward her. "You say we bring ruin, but we bring something else. Pain, passion, rage, despair. Yes, it is ugly. It is dangerous, but it is life. The kind that breaks through the cracks in your perfect asphalt, and you offer only the peace of the grave beneath that asphalt." Themis looked at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty? Doubt? Or simply hatred for the fact that he, the embodiment of the end, was speaking of life. "You want to stop me?" she asked, and her staff glowed faintly. "Try. I know all your weaknesses, Lord of Shadows. I know the pain every soul causes you. I can fill this world with such a scream that you will go mad." Cairn snarled and raised his axe. "Threatening us? Go on, try. I'll smash your court to splinters." Tekka froze, her mind feverishly working, searching for a way out, a loophole, a chance to outmaneuver someone who knew all her moves. Haion, however, simply stood and looked at Themis. And suddenly, there was no anger or hatred in his gaze. There was only infinite, all-consuming pity. "I know what you feel," he said so quietly, the words barely reached her. "The desire to control everything, because when everything spins out of control, the world falls apart. But it has already happened, Themis. Olympus fell. Your control is an illusion. You are fighting ghosts, trying to build a house on ashes." He turned away from her, and the shadows followed him. "We are leaving. We will not fight you, because you are not our enemy. You are our reflection, just as wretched and lost as we are." And he walked away into the fog. Cairn, after a moment of stunned incomprehension, cursed and followed him. Tekka hesitated for a moment, her gaze darting from Haion's retreating back to Themis's motionless figure. And something beyond paranoia flashed in her eyes. Insight. She saw a system doomed to fail due to its own inflexibility, and that was calming. She turned and ran to catch up with the others. Themis remained standing alone at the entrance to her grotto. Her face was hidden by the hood. Only her fingers clenched her staff convulsively. Her justice had been rejected. Her verdict had not been carried out. And in the silence, alone with the ghost of her order, she doubted her own righteousness for the first time in many long years. And this doubt was more terrifying than any golem.
They walked in silence. The fog thickened.
turning into a cold, prickly drizzle. The gorges and ruins gave way to an endless, dead plain littered with rock fragments resembling the tombstones of a forgotten world. There were no cultists, no monsters, only the wind, howling a lonely song about the end of everything. Cairn finally broke. He drove his axe forcefully into the cracked earth. So what? His voice sounded hollow, devoid of its usual rage. Are we just going to wander until we rot? Is that your grand plan, Death? He looked at Heian with defiance, but his eyes held only a weary emptiness. The battle with the Titan, the encounter with Themis, it had all proven meaningless. There was no victory, no defeat. There was only attrition. Teika stood, hugging herself, continuously scanning the horizon. Her lips moved soundlessly, whispering, calculating the probabilities of their survival, the chances of finding food, the angle of attack of potential threats. The numbers added up to 0. Always to 0. She was right, she said, suddenly, not looking at anyone. Themis, we are a mistake, an anomaly. The system strives for balance and we are the imbalance sooner or later. She didn't finish. The words, "we will be eliminated," hung in the air. Heian stopped. He turned slowly and looked at them. Not at the gods of war and wisdom, at a wounded beast and a hunted paranoid. At beings just as lost as he was. Do you have somewhere to go? He asked, simply. Do you have a goal for which you are willing to stop being what you have become? Silence was his answer.